I offer my loving pranams at the divine feet of our Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Distinguished guests, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Jai Sai Ram to you all. Like Ketan Bhai said, it's really joyful to see you all here in person. It's been exciting times for all of us. You will recall that, one second. You will recall at the virtual NOBC of last year, we shared with you some of the work that we were looking into. This organization is a voluntary organization. It's a spiritual organization, but it's not exempt from laws and regulations of this country. The focus of my talk today will be on the compliance matters that the organization is subject to. So, as devotees of Bhagwan, we always try our very best to follow his teachings. In his discourse at the World Conference of 21st November 1985, Swami gave 10 principles that should guide our lives. One of the principles that he mentioned at that conference was for us to observe the country's laws and to be an exemplary citizen. He said, "Never go against the law of the land, follow the letter of the law." The members of the Sri Sathya Sai organization should follow the law in spirit, also and be models for the government. Like I said, as a spiritual and humanitarian organization, we are subject to certain legal and regulatory obligations due to the activities that we undertake. Although we are an incorporated organization, we are not exempt from these requirements. With that in mind, I share with you the work that the Council has been working on during the last couple of years. Swami has said, for the mansion of life, self-confidence is the foundation. Self-satisfaction are its walls, and self-sacrifice the roof. Self-realization is the life. If we use this quote of Swami's, then the foundation of the organization, it's its centers and groups. Without the centers and the groups, the organization is nothing. This is where all the activities take place. It is the centers that perform all the activities. For the organization to be able to meet its regulatory and legal obligations, it needs to support its centers and groups, providing sufficient guidance and implement a working manual to ensure that these centers operate within the boundaries of the law. So I thought this was an appropriate thing to show you visually that the National Council provides that support through the various legal obligations that we have and how we support the centers and the groups. Like Ketan Bhai said, the last 2 years have been very difficult, very challenging for all of us due to the impact of COVID. Initially, we closed all our centers in the first year. And then as restrictions started to get lifted, we put a risk assessment in place and followed government guidelines. And even now, when all the restrictions have been lifted, almost all, the government has itself said that the pandemic is not over yet. There is still emergence of different variants. We're very encouraged that over 55% of our centers and groups have started to resume in-person activities. Each of these centers had completed their risk assessments, which were approved by their respective regional presidents. We also observed that during the latter part of 2021, when Omicron was rampant across the country, these centers temporarily suspended their activities, which gave us a lot of encouragement that they are taking their responsibility seriously. However, as we resume some sort of normal life now, we still request those centers that require or that wish to open up, please continue to follow the risk assessments, as we all need to still continue to be careful. Now that we're affiliated with the Global Council, we had issued new certificate of affiliations to all our centers and groups last year. We continue to adhere to policies and procedures as we've always done so. We've reminded all centers and groups to use the new logo of the organization and ensure that any websites, whether they're at center level, regional level, and the name of the organization is looked at, the logo is amended. So we're trying to standardize what we put out in the public domain. One significant change that we made at the National Council was that all council members now use the organization's domain email address. This allows us to ensure that we record everything that is communicated with centers between us, so our successors can follow on from where we left on. So they will have visibility of any issues that we dealt with and have transparency of all our communications. Everything that we're working on as a council, we do so with a view that we ensure we protect not only the organization and the members, but more importantly, Swami's name. The organization bears his name, so it is our duty to ensure that we protect Swami's name. In order to cover ourselves from any public liability and to protect the reputation of the organization, we have in place a public liability insurance policy that covers all our centers and groups. Therefore, it is mandatory for all centers and groups to be insured under this national policy. The policy covers all our activities, including all our service projects that have been approved by the organization from the center level, regional level, and national level. As you all know, GDPR came into place in 2018. We always had data protection regulations in this country, but we harmonized our regulation across all European member states, and UK itself now has, after Brexit, continued to follow the general data protection regulations. Last year, we finalized our organization's privacy policy. It's available on our website. We've encouraged all centers to make it available to their devotees, and again, it's published on center and regional websites. We've since rolled out a member data collection form. This form is to ensure that every member of the organization is aware of our privacy policy, and that the consent that they give to this organization is in line with the policy. It will help them understand how we collect data, how we store the data, and how the data is processed, and what rights do they have over that data. So it is very important that this consent form is completed, because in 2018, when GDPR kicked in, many of our devotees completed those forms, but at the time, unfortunately, we didn't have a privacy policy in place. We've now implemented the privacy policy, and we want to ensure that everyone that provides its consent gives the consent in line with the policy. Our Bal Vikas wing is the largest wing. It's got so many children, and it is the duty of our organization to ensure that we've got an adequate child safeguarding policy in place. Our National Bal Vikas coordinators had worked extremely hard over the last 3 years and prepared a comprehensive child safeguarding policy for the organization. Like I said, it is one of the key wings of our organization, and it is one area where this regulation specifically applies. We are currently engaged in communications with the NSPCC, and we've engaged with one of the specialist consultants who is prepared to review our policy and ensure that it meets with the regulatory obligations and the standards that we are subject to. Just wanted to mention that all this work that is happening, even this consultation with the NSPCC, will come at a cost, but we're very happy to bear that cost because it is very important for the organization. As you know, like I mentioned, that Bal Vikas is one of our largest wings. And as part of protecting our children, we're all required to have DBS clearance done. And DBS, as you know, is the previous abbreviation of criminal CRB that we all knew about. Our organization's policy was that we will recertify everyone every 3 years once they've been DBS cleared. But because of the pandemic last couple of years, unfortunately, we were not able to hold any DBS sessions to extend or renew those certificates. Most activities were suspended in the first year of the COVID virus year. As an organization, we decided whether we should extend that time frame from 3 years to 4 years. But what we didn't also want to do is also provide a blanket extension to everybody. So we also considered whether we should get an attestation done by those individuals whose certificates need renewal. There were some practical difficulties in also getting those attestations done and to be able to recertify them, because we were finding that many activities had been suspended and there was sometimes no need for the certificate to be renewed. And we only wanted to do the renewal if there was a requirement to renew. Because under our data protection rules, we're only required to do certain things where we have a legal and lawful reason to do so. So we have to bear all the other aspects of the law in mind when we do certain things. We've now looked into various options as to how can we continue recertifying our members. We looked at, like I said, various things, giving an extension, changing our policy, doing attestations. And then we reflected back on what had happened in the last couple of years. With COVID being in place, restrictions were lifted, then again we went into lockdown, then we went back again. So it was very difficult for us to work out what is the right solution. We've now considered a solution where we can now do DBS checks online, that we don't need to have in-person clinics done. The process can be very smooth. Even the DBS authorities have recognized the difficulties of the pandemic, and where we needed to review the identity of the individual in person, they've allowed us now to review the identification documents virtually as well. So this is something that the council is now considering, whether that is an option for us. And it saves us running up and down the country to run these DBS clinics. So this is something that we're currently considering. And obviously, any decision that we make, we will share with you all. One of the aspects of DBS also is that they have introduced what is known as the update service. So once we've certified an individual, what we can do is within 28 days of their certification being issued, they get registered on the update service. And that takes away the need for us to renew the certificate every 3 years, because the data is then regularly kept online and you can periodically check if there's any issues against the individual. So that even provides us a better service. As Ketan Bhai mentioned, there are all these projects going on in the organization behind the scenes. Obviously, we're also involved with all the events that take place. We support the centers, we support the regions in many ways, but there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. And what I would urge all of you is that if you've got any expertise in any of these areas, please come forward, please come and support us. The organization is for each one of us. It's not that this responsibility lies just with the council members. We all benefit from this organization. So it is important that if you can support the organization in any way, even from an administrative perspective, if you've got time on your hands and you're happy to help out with just sending messages out, following up on certain matters, any help will be appreciated. I would just like to conclude with a quote from Swami. Swami says, "See all work as spiritual exercise, as an offering, then work is transformed into worship. Thank you, Jay Sarah.